things that I want to tackle is memorization, mostly in math, but it's also, used on all platforms and also in language. The way that it's done, or at least the way that I remember it, really is what I believe the wrong way. And I think we've always known it. There just didn't seem to be any other way of getting it done. So I've had a lot of time to think about it, and most of it comes from my own experience, especially really with language, because math has never been my strong point. There were a few things like algebra that I absolutely loved and excelled at, and then there were other points where I just didn't get it, like geometry. I just couldn't get for some odd reason. So it's a mixed bag with math as far as I go. But language, it's always been the same. I always enjoy language, and I've always understood the way that I learned it to be the right way. And anytime I took a class to try and learn it, it seemed like all of a sudden I no longer had my resilience to learn. It just seemed so strange that I could do so well at one point and then all of a sudden just be so clueless. And really what it comes down to is the way that we learn the language or math, the way that we retain it. Naturally, you don't memorize things. And naturally, you see something and you remember it in a different way. It's a lot like when you're a kid and you're at the bus stop and you have to walk home. You know the way home. You may not be able to explain it to someone else because you're missing some of the vital details, but you know enough of it to get there. And that's really all you need. And that's the way that the brain works naturally. There's just so much information to take in, and it's kind of silly to take it all. So really all you need are just the fragments that make what you need to do possible, and anything else is an extra that you end up forgetting. And that's a lot of what happens in the education system, is they're trying to get you to remember every piece of it. And not only does it not work, but it really doesn't make sense. You're not set up that way, and it's an impossible task that they try year after year to get you to do. And even now as an adult, a lot of that information I've since forgotten. So again, it seems kind of silly to go through the effort only to end up where everyone else does, at the other end, graduated and forgetting a lot of what you had worked so hard to remember. And a lot of it has to do with the way we remember it. So it's when I was learning HTML, I didn't write the code a million times over and over and over again like they have you do for spelling, or like they have you do with math, where you just the times tables, write them a million times over and over and over again. Yes, writing helps, but it's not the only way. The key factor is making sense of what you're looking at. And most of the time what you're looking at is so abstract and so far removed that you really don't even know why you even have to know it. And I think that's the big hurdle for a lot of students, is getting past the point of feeling that it's futile, that there's no point to it, so why bother? And that's the other thing I want to touch on is there is a point. It's a big point. And there's a reason why everyone wants you to know it. And again, because it's abstract, it just doesn't seem to make any sense, but I want to try and make sense of it and bring everything together. So when it comes to memorizing, you have to make sense of it for it to even be retained in your brain. Anything else, it's just going to see it as unnecessary and get rid of it. So there's just no point in trying any other way. So when looking at a line of code, instead of writing it a million times over and over again, I try to make sense of it and say, okay, why is this here? What is its function? And how is it useful to me? And so long as you can answer all of that and have a definitive answer for it, not just an, well, I don't know, kind of answer, then you'll succeed. So, a certain character, why does it need to be there? And a lot of this has to go along with the desire to know everything, which sometimes is the annoying tick about me, is I want to know everything, and that's why, because I know better that if I don't find out, that then it's not going to make sense, and then I'm just not going to be interested, because it's not going to be interesting. It's just going to be another thing I just have to know because someone says so. So why not dig a little deeper and find out exactly why you need that? And then it's kind of fun. And then when someone asks you about it, you have just a plethora of information on the topic. And you somewhat become an expert because you make it your business to know. You don't have to wait for someone to teach you because often that time will never come. And you shouldn't ever think that it would, because that's the reality, is that in life people don't sit you down and teach you things, which really the whole education system is artificial in itself. It's necessary, so that's why it's there, but it's very artificial. People don't sit you down and teach you things. The natural way is for you to struggle and then look to find others who succeed and try to mimic them. That's the natural learning curve, is for you to seek them out. The problem with that is that society as a whole would collapse if we relied on that, because people would wait until the last minute and then they would be scrambling to try and figure something out, and we would just have massive famine, and it just wouldn't go over well. So the big thing is convincing students that yes, it's artificial, yes, it's abstract, but it's just so necessary and so essential. It's the only reason that our society goes on. It really is. And there are a lot of adults who still don't understand that, where they see continued education as a waste of time and money, and then they take offense to it because they feel like victims, that it's an option they can't do, so then they say, well, there's nothing a college student would know better than me, how could you even grade that? How could you say that that individual is better than me in the workforce? Well, it's not. You're using the wrong word. It's not better than. It's just educated. When you're educated, it has nothing to do with morals or intelligence even, and there are plenty of examples of that. You don't have to be intelligent to be successful. You don't have to be the most moral individual and really rub everybody the right way to be successful, and there's plenty of proof of that as well. You just have to be educated. You just have to know what you need to know to get it done. And that's really all it comes down to. And people are still shocked when they see someone who's successful and they don't meet the other criteria. Where they say, oh, she's such an idiot. How could she possibly make so much money? Or he's so stuck up, or he's such a jerk. How could anyone work with him? But that's just it. No matter who you are and what you are at that point in time, so long as you can get the job done, that's really all that matters when it comes to being successful in society. And that's what it all comes down to, is to educate yourself. Because so long as you deny yourself any additional knowledge, you really deny yourself any additional support, anything more out of life than what you already have, and you'll never get it, to be honest. The lottery's never the answer. Inheritance is never the answer. The answer is you. The answer is you saying to yourself, what haven't I done or tried to make this work? And what's proven? It's not about a pyramid scheme. It's what's proven that, and that answer really, it should be, out in the front. It really should be too obvious. It would almost seem cliche. And that's really what it comes down to. It's just such common knowledge that it kind of becomes uncommon, because we just get so used to hearing it and seeing it that it just kind of becomes a no answer, because it's hit that extreme of being the answer. That's what everyone's doing. That's what you should do. And that's the problem, really, especially with words. Branding of products is notorious for this. When it becomes so common that it's an everyday thing, it starts to reach the point where it goes into the negative, where people no longer recognize it anymore because it's so common. It almost becomes a part of the dictionary. It's just like a Q-tip, for example. That's a brand, but everyone refers to it as the object. So you're no longer thinking of the brand anymore. And then when you do see the brand, you almost think it's generic. It would be like, instead of buying Purdue chicken, you're buying a chicken. You know, it just kind of seems silly. You're like buying Q-tip from Q-tip brand. You know, that'd be like beer brand of beer. It no longer is effective. In fact, it's even worse than if it were a brand new brand that nobody knew anything about. So that kind of thinking, unfortunately, affects education as well, where you have commonplace, common knowledge things that unfortunately reach that point where they need to be reconfigured and become new again for anyone to take notice. And it's really sad because they are so incredibly important, which is how they end up that way. And I think it just begs the question of new material, of not just having the same old thing because people get tired of it. You have to reinvent. And with teaching, that is a big part of it, is reinventing it over and over again and reconfiguring it over and over again. So it becomes interesting and new every time. And it's no longer a lecture, it's a real learning experience because the world works that way. It's always new, it's always different, it's always changing. And that's the way that education should be, so that it's always interesting. And unfortunately, that's the downfall of an intelligent brain, is just that you really crave things to change and new experiences. And when things become commonplace and they just become complacent, then they're boring. And then you don't want anything to do with it. So that's really the big problem, is I need to figure out a way of taking things that are so essential they've become commonplace and are no longer interesting, and making them new again and changing them so that there's something that everyone hears as if it were for the first time, but there's still a connection. So that's when things click, when they say, oh, that's why we do this, that, or the other thing. Now it makes sense. Now it clicks. And that's what needs to be